the breath is so important because we're oxygen machines. Whether we bring that oxygen in water or whatever we do, breathing is such a key. So for the aging brain, for anybody's brain really, movement and breath are so important.
Welcome to the 100-Year Lifestyle Podcast, dedicated to you and your loved ones living at 100% for 100 years and beyond. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Plasker. Welcome, everybody, to the 100-Year Lifestyle Podcast. Dr. Eric Plasker here, and hey, we're going to talk about your brain today. We're going to talk about how to keep it young and healthy for the long haul, starting out with kids and growing up into aging. And I got a really special guest with us today, a really good friend, actually, from recent friend, fast friends. We have a lot in common, Dr. Patrick Porter from BrainTap Technologies. Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
My pleasure. Listen, your background about the brain, learning about the brain, just give us a little history so people get to know why we should pay attention to you today.
Well, my journey started a long time ago. So basically, when I was a young man, about 12 years old, my dad became an instructor of something with the mind called the Silva method, which actually trained the brain to go to an alpha state and helped me to get out of my problems with attention deficit and became an honor roll student. And that kind of launched my journey. And as I got older, I got into doing things with GSR machines, galvanic skin response systems, to train the brain. And from there, I was a researcher for a company called Light and Sound Research. And then that evolved into taking over that company, building a franchise company, and now selling that off in 2002, and then starting what we have now, which is BrainTap. We just want to help maximize people's brain function and nervous system and get them back online, because as we know, what we've discovered is that the brain is plastic or has neuroplasticity. And back when we first started, of course, we were told, hey, the brain doesn't change. You're born with this certain brain. It's got a blueprint, and you're either an accountant or an artist or whatever it is, and that's all you are. But now, I think now you can't walk through the grocery store without seeing an article about the brain on the cover of every other magazine.
Yeah, it's exciting new developments. And, fortunately for you, and fortunately for me, and for many of the people that we know in our world of chiropractic and holistic healthcare, and we've known all of these things about the brain for decades and decades and decades. I remember, when my son, our oldest son, had a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury from a fall, and we were told by the greatest neurologists of the day that, I'm sorry, Dr. and Mrs. Plasker, but your child will never walk, talk, or use his arm. And we were like, are you kidding me? We don't believe that. And now here he is 29 years later. He's a practicing chiropractor in Bend, Oregon with his sister. And he's doing amazing, and he's helping people with traumatic brain injuries to live differently. But we didn't buy into that, Dr. Patrick. We didn't buy into the fact that the brain was stagnant. And so let's start in the beginning, like young, how the brain develops, and what is neuroplasticity for a parent raising a child? Why should they pay attention to it? And then let's lead into longevity, living your ideal 100-year lifestyle with a healthy brain, so you have your faculties and your energy and your spirit and your consciousness all along the way.
Okay, well, we can start. I'm going to fast forward through some of this, but the brain literally starts to develop, of course, in the womb. And then as we go through the birth channel, it triggers these primitive reflexes that we have. And if they're not triggered appropriately, then the nervous system doesn't function appropriately. And because the brain is 70% of the nervous system, a lot of issues start actually at birth. They don't realize it. And there's a lot of times people actually who, if you were born cesarean, you might have some of these primitive reflexes because the body responds to pressure or to stress. So pressure and stress help us grow and develop our brains. If we don't stress our brain, if we don't pressure our brain, like exercise, for instance, they know that if a child is sedentary, playing computer games all day, they're going to develop a different brain than someone's out there playing sports. And it's so important to play sports that are what I would call whole brain sports, like martial arts, learning to dance, different things that we do with our whole body, swimming. These are all things that as kids we do, without even thinking about it. There's actually somebody named Feldenkrais who wrote all about this and how he helped people's brains and bodies, because he even taught them to do what's called a cross crawl. So some of your listeners might be familiar with that. So just crawling on the floor can help people stop stuttering and all sorts of different things that happen. So
Yeah,
the nervous system
let me,
develops at
if
a
you don't
young age.
mind, one thing real quick. What you just said, so vital, which is these are the things that we started doing with Jacob 30 years ago, 29 years ago, this cross crawl patterning, whole brain type things, stimulation from all different senses, much different than a lot of kids are being raised today, like you just said, sitting down all day long, playing games and not using their whole body. And so I love that you're talking about it from that perspective, because number one, it's true. And number two, hopefully it'll get some people moving.
Yeah, the key is not to be a screen person. You know, there's a time for screens, of course. You can have entertainment and do those kind of things, but we need to do, the reason our brain is as big as it is now, besides the fact that we started eating protein, they say in the evolutionary period, but also we exercise. We exercise our body, we move, we learn to stand up on our two legs, all these things. And as we developed all of these different brains that we have, you could break them down into many different features, but let's just talk about the executive functioning of the brain, because that's what's getting people in trouble today. So as we grow older, our executive functioning starts to put meaning to what's happening to us. And if we didn't have meaning, we would just be like dogs and cats or whatever. We'd just be led by our reflexes. But in the reality is that we add meaning to it. So sometimes if we get too stressed out, what happens, and that's what's happening now with people, they call it, we call it sympathetic survival syndrome, because the sympathetic system has been basically put on red alert. Everybody's on fight or flight. They're go, go, go. Everybody wants to move. That's why I wrote the book Thrive and Overdrive, is because so many people want to go, go, go. Well, for the brain is just like any other muscle. You can overtrain the body, you can overstimulate the brain. So there's a time for downtime and a time for uptime. So what we found with working with people, now a lot of people know computer games and they challenge their brain doing crossword puzzles, doing all these things. That's a totally different brain training than really maximizing your brain's function. Our brain and our body, we are designed to process light, sound, and vibration. That's the way our universe is designed. Everything has a vibration. For instance, there's a vibratory field around the planet they call the Schumann frequency, which is 7.8 hertz frequency, and our bodies respond to that. When we're in the city, it's about 18 hertz frequency. So our brain is always matching that. If we have multiple activities during the day, like we get up, we exercise, we work, we talk, we communicate, we're social beings. So if we don't have that social interaction, and that's more than just liking somebody on Facebook, you know, it's really getting out there and being social, then that also grows our brain. We start to adapt. This neuroplasticity in our brain, it works best if we challenge our brain. Don't do the same things every day. In fact, we used to challenge our clients. Take a different way to work every day. Get creative. Do something. Plan different meals. Don't just go to the grocery store, buy the same things. The more we can teach our brain to adapt, the better it is. And that's really one of the key features of what we developed when we started doing brain tap. So with a 100-year lifestyle, if you really want to grow what I like to say, better looking and more intelligent with age, you really want to basically act like a kid. And what does a kid do? They are quizzards. And what I mean by that is they question everything. You know, you get up and say, not just why, but hey, how does that work? What happens there? What would happen if I did that? When your brain starts to think that way, neurology follows, because and those are statements of possibility. So the brain works best with possibility, and the energy that our brain consumes in our body is 25% of the energy sources. So it's always looking for ways to shut down because it's using so much energy. But one thing is, once we get it maximized and working appropriately, even though it's using a lot of energy, when we're eating the right foods, exercising, thinking proper thoughts, getting adequate rest, all the things you talk about in the 100-year lifestyle, basically what happens is the brain functions on a higher level. Now, it's normal out there if you're somebody that says, well, at night I'm just plain tired. Well, that's the way our body's designed. But if you took time in the middle of the afternoon to do some form of really constructive mindfulness, meditation, that's why we do brain tap, but some way to reboot your system. You can do that through, some people do it just through exercise, which is a great way to do it, but the body still needs to rest and recover. In fact, one of the things for the listeners, I hope in August of this year, 2019, I wrote an article for Ironman magazine that's coming out. And it talks about how our brain, which creates acetylcholine and alpha, actually binds to the muscles and makes the muscles grow stronger and healthier. They call it the mind-muscle connection. And people that visualize, like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all of those, would use, while they're exercising, they actually visualize their muscles getting stronger and healthier, where they've also proven that if somebody exercises and think, oh my God, this is terrible, why do I have to do this? When you approach that exercise with joy and with an expectancy of health and vitality, the body literally responds with health and vitality. So your thoughts are very important.
Yeah, very important. And, one of the things that we talk about often in the 100-Year Lifestyle is developing a vision for your extended life. We are the first generation in history getting this advance notice that we're probably going to live longer than we ever thought. And there are so many people out there that they get to the age of 50, 55, 60, and they put so much pressure on themselves. They think their life is over. It's like, oh my God, I'm at the end of my life. Or this is when society says I'm supposed to stop thinking, I'm going to go hibernate and disappear for a while. And the reality of it is, and what we talk about so much is that, listen, you got decades of wisdom in you, and to develop a vision for your extended life that your brain can organize behind is so important. You know, the movie Grumpy Old Men and then the sequel Grumpier Old Men became so popular because that's the vision that we see. We see older people that aren't really doing much, so they just get in everybody's business all the time, when then the reality is that's not what it's like in the rest of the world. We wrote an article for 100yearlifestyle.com. By the way, you can get a lot of Dr. Patrick's articles on 100yearlifestyle.com. We've got them up there. We've got some great YouTubes with him also, and he'll give you all the information about how to reach him at the end of the podcast here. But what you see now is you see people that as they start to develop a vision for the rest of their life beyond where they are, and it doesn't matter if you're 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, the more you can clarify your vision, the more your brain will actually reinvent yourself around your thoughts and your vision, which is a lot of what, whether it's wealth or whether it's stresslessness or whether it's relationships, and you use all of those types of resources, you address all of those things in the BrainTap technology that can be used from people of all ages.
Yeah, it's important for everyone to realize, and Wayne Dyer said it best, he said, never let an old person inhabit your body. You know, so when you think about it, I mean, I remember my daughter when she turned 32 was talking about how she was such an old lady, and I did a pattern interrupt with her. I said, Fran, I was of course 50 something at that time, and I said, hey, I would love to trade in this body for a 32, but this is one we have. So you're only as young, and even in yoga, when even the masters who taught yoga for thousands of years, they say you're only as young as your spine is flexible. And so chiropractors know that. And the whole thing is that the spine is the keyboard to the brain. And if we keep the body limber, we keep the mind sharp, it doesn't matter what we are at any age. I mean, we just did a HRV scan with a woman who was 102 years old, still lives alone, still, and she's down in Florida, and you wouldn't know it. She tested better than some people that we test that are 60 years old, because she's out there doing it. The worst thing that can happen is you die before your body's buried. So we need to keep the body going and striving. And when you talk about long term, they actually know that all success in life happens because of people with long-term vision.
I love that.
If you don't have long-term vision, you're not going to have a very good life expectancy, because you're in that fight or flight, you're in that stress mode all the time. But it's just like taking a trip with your family when you were a kid and you wanted to get there faster and faster. And if you what I did with my son, actually, and kind of using this as a metaphor, was we were on a family trip across the country in our RV, and he kept wanting to know where we were going, how fast we're going to get there. So I finally took out the map and I said, Alex, every time we pass by a city you see on the map, tell me about it. Well, he did that every once in a while, but it gave him something to look forward to. He knew the end goal. And when we pulled into San Diego, which we were going across the country, he goes, man, that was fast. Because he knew along the way the little road markers, he knew the cities we were going to pass. And so people, they need to know there's milestones in their life, and they need to know that there's an end result. And the end result isn't just getting out of here. The old expression, no one gets out of here alive. The reality is to leave an impression that's not left in a mud puddle, but in the side of a mountain. You want to be able to change lives.
Yeah, and you are changing lives, by the way, and I love that we get to work together in this way, and I love that our listeners are hopefully being inspired by the opportunity to start to formulate a vision that it's never too late. We had the same experience with a lot of patients when they were young. It's like, oh my God, Dr. Plasker, I feel so old, I'm 25. I want you out of your mind. Time is on your side. There's a principle of healing that's one of the 33 principles that we studied in chiropractic school. It was called "There is no process that does not require time." And I remember in my 20s, I hated that principle. Now that I'm 56, I love that principle. It's one of my favorite principles. And as people's brains, there's a lot of misinformation about the aging brain. I know my dad, for example, we've talked about this before, you and I, he started taking these statin drugs when he was in his 60s. He had a heart attack at 49. It scared him. He changed his life, which was the good thing, but he started taking these statin drugs that were not tested long-term. They basically, there's a book about it, Lipitor, Thief of Memory, how he was on Lipitor for so many years, and he died at the age of 78 with a healthy heart and no brain for a decade, because he literally, it wiped out his brain. It's one of the reasons why I stay so motivated to reach people with this message. And taking a lot of these medications versus stimulating the brain has given people a very false sense of hope and possibility as it relates to aging. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, first off, one of the worst things they ever created, but the most profitable drug ever on the market is these drugs, these statin drugs. It's terrible. And the reality is that they don't really know what they're doing long term, like you're saying, and they're taking away the protection that our body has against inflammation. Our brain is almost all fat. So when you think about your brain and what it needs most as we age, besides just activity and thinking and being creative, look at people like Grandma Moses, who started painting at 55, things like that. So when you think about what's going on, our brain needs healthy fat. That's one of the key things that people can do, and get the inflammation to go down. Inflammation is not only the killer to your automobile, that's why we have to change the oil, it's also the killer to our body. So once that inflammation, it starts in the brain. So when we talk about that, but the other thing is when you start to, breathing is so important. I mean, when people, they just sat in front of the mirror for a week and watched how they breathe, most people are going to be shocked because they don't even realize they're holding their breath. If they've ever been sitting there and they go, they kind of catch themselves, that means you were just holding your breath. At night when they're sleeping, they're probably holding their breath, 10, 15 times a night, which is something like sleep apnea or something. They can get that checked out. But the breath is so important because we're oxygen machines. Whether we bring that oxygen in water or whatever we do, breathing is such a key. So for the aging brain, for anybody's brain really, movement and breath are so important. When we work with, and we learned this from some of our neurological doctors that work with us at BrainTap, after they got done working with people like the people at Life University and things like that are in the Neuro Center, they would have people do things like martial arts, dancing, yoga, do something to move and breathe, and if you can't do anything else, get out there and walk. There's a lot of research out there that shows that for brain health, if you can get out and walk and breathe. We had one of our doctors, Dr. Russell Court, who he did, and this is going to be one of our podcasts that will come out, but he does something called the ABCs when people are walking to prove how the nervous system works. And if you walk with swinging your arms like this and have perfect form for walking and do the ABCs, most people, even the most intelligent people we've ever tested, can't do it because they're thinking and moving at the same time. So that's why humming or talking and walking, that's a joke people have, you can't chew gum and walk at the same time. But when you're doing these different things, you're doing different hemisphere functions. And that's going to get this corpus callosum. This is, this hippocampus, which is the largest area of brain mass and the neurological activity. When you think about memory, most people think our brain, we just go back and we find this file that has our memories. The reality is that memories are pulled up from no less than 5 places in the brain. So that means if any one of those connections, think of your hard drive right now. When I first bought a computer, I remember buying the first time it was a hard drive computer. Before that, it was floppy disk. But we buy a computer with a hard drive. The guy says, you are never going to need another hard drive the rest of your life. This is 20 megabytes. Well, we have pictures that are 30 megabytes now, so it's like our brain and our hard drives are all unorganized. Think of your brains as a hard drive, and we have to have a path of activity to it. Memory isn't the problem. It's the accessing of those memories. And that comes from use. So, the one thing you can do is revisit positive past experiences. That's one of the best ways. We teach people how to create a success reel and refresh the most positive memories, because if you don't refresh them, they tend to fade away.
Yeah, it's interesting how you say that too. We do a lot of speaker training where we get people to find their voice and to really tap into it. And we talk about not just because people have a story that they tell, they use their brain, they get used to telling the same story over and over and over again. They tell it the same way over and over and over again. And one of the exercises that we do is we have them go back and visit the prequel of that story. Like, how did you get to that place in the story? And give it a lot of detail, describe it in color, and build on all the events that were happening around you, and really pay attention to the prequel, and then look at the sequel that it could be of that story, and explore multiple options of the sequel to expand your brain and your consciousness, and then exercise it through your mouth. Because yeah, the brain is a hard drive, like you're saying, that is completely flexible in how the resources are utilized if you exercise it in a certain way. And we've learned about this, fortunately, as a practicing chiropractor for 34 years, and we've seen it in our profession, that people start to get adjusted, and all of a sudden they'll tell us things like they have more energy, their brain is sharper, their ability to focus is better, because obviously, like you said, that the movement in the brain and the movement in the spine contributes to the brain. That's why people walk, and that's why we instruct people to do things like that. And so really, there are so many amazing things that people can do. Talk to us a little bit more about BrainTap specifically, and the technology of how it supports the brain, which is advanced technology that, compared to what we used to use with Jacob way back when he was injured after that traumatic birth injury, we used sound support, we used visual support, visual stimulation to support the development of his brain. And we used it on all our kids, who are all doing amazing. They're very sharp, very smart. And it's not an accident. It's because of a lot of the things that were done way back when we didn't even know that the research didn't even support it, but we just knew based on our philosophy and vision of what was possible for the body that you could do this.
Right. So when we talk about the brain, it's really, think of it as a sense organ that brings in all of our sensory-based experiences from the world we live in. And we're listening, we're comprehending, we're responding to that world. So we use sound, just like you're talking about. We'll use sounds that create cortical responses in the brain, in the deep brain, so the brain can follow them. There's different frequencies in the brain. So if the listeners that aren't familiar with it, we have frequency called beta, which is where we're communicating now. This is usually where we make logical decisions. But if we get stuck in beta too much, then we get too much anxiety and stress. In fact, that brainwave's out of balance. So in our machine, we start with beta because we have to meet people in their world, and then we train them to get more into alpha. Alpha is a very powerful state. Everyone out there has been in alpha before. It's usually when you're doing something creative that you love, where, like Einstein said, if you're around a beautiful woman for an hour, it seems like a minute. If you're sitting in a hot stove for a minute, it seems like an hour. That's because alpha there's no time there. When you're doing something you love, and each one of these has neurotransmitters that are associated with them that we might get to also. But then we have theta, which is very hard to get to with sound. So when we first started out in our light and sound research company that I was the researcher for back in the late 80s and early 90s, before I started my franchise company, we did just sound. We used binaural beats, and we used isochronic tones in the form of like drum circles or shamanistic drums that we would find that when you did the research, they would put people into altered states, and they would have these disassociated states. And we were doing it more to get people off of alcohol and drugs, which they're still doing today. They're still trying to figure that one out. But what we found was certain people could only get to that alpha, which is very good. Alpha is a very good state. Most people meditate in alpha, but theta is where the body really releases GABA is released during that, or programmed to be produced by the gut at that time in the brain, which is really known for the parasympathetic system, which, for those listeners out there that know, that's the healing system of the body. So if you think about when you're in that state, you're healing. So we wanted to get people into theta. So we started introducing light. Now, something we've done just 3 years ago is introduce the light in the ears, but back in the mid 80s, when we started doing the retinal flashing, we didn't have neurofeedback then. So we knew people were relaxed or not relaxed based on hand temperature, respiration, different things like that we could measure. But now we can actually look at the brain. we were using something called the mind mirror, so we'd know if they were in their right hemisphere or left hemisphere. And what we were trying to do is balance these hemispheres, because we also know if the brain is balanced, you won't get dementia. Just to give your listeners an idea, we can now measure the brain speed. So your left hemisphere has a different speed than your right hemisphere. If it does, you're probably going to have an imbalance in your life. For instance, if your left hemisphere slows down before your right hemisphere, you're going to develop dementia. So we've worked with the doctors and we've created brain tap sessions that speed up the left hemisphere, slow down the right so they balance again, and neuroplasticity returns. One study we did actually created 64% more neuroplasticity in 6 weeks. This is because our brain loves light, sound, and vibration. Our brain, 30% of our brain is used through the auditory channels, so that's pretty good. But visual accesses 100% of our brain's neural functioning, because it's so important for our survival. So even listening, when somebody says, why do we have lights in the eyes? Well, if you close your eyes, you've just shut down your frontal cortex. That's what we do. If you go to a scary movie and you go, oh man, it's a movie, then you shut off your frontal cortex and it says, okay, you're not in the movie, you're sitting in the studio or you're sitting in your couch, it's fine, you're safe. But what happens when you're under stress and you do that is all of your answers go away. So you just become more stressed and it can exacerbate the problem. So what we've done is we introduce light. And to give an example to the listeners, if you've ever been to a lecture and you couldn't really hear the lecturer at church maybe, and you couldn't hear the homily, but then you went around the person's head that was in front of you and you looked around, you saw them, then you could hear them. They now know that 30% of your hearing comes in through your eyes. That's pretty amazing. And we were doing this before we knew that. So research is showing that. Now our ears actually too, the reason we do that is light is one of the most underprescribed nutrients on earth. So when you think about the 100-year lifestyle, we need light. We need morning light, we need evening light, we need healthy light. Our homes, we use John Ott lights. So there's healthy lights that you can get for your home. Full spectrum lighting is what it's called. But your brain needs light to function. So what we do is we bring light into the ears. It's absorbed at a 470 nanometer light and 633 nanometer light. The body absorbs that into the hemoglobin, circulates through the body. It finds the cells that are going through apoptosis or cell death. At that moment, it exchanges that photon into that cell. It then it starts up the Krebs cycle or starts up the mitochondria in that cell, which means they've just given that cell new life again. The instruction set of that cell never dies. So now it's back functioning the way it was intended. And that happens through light. It happens anyway.
That was a mouthful of great science and research and all that kind of stuff. What are the benefits? So if somebody's listening and saying, you know what, I'm not a scientist, I want to age well, I'm an earthling, I'm an ordinary person, I want to be smart, sharp as I age. What's the benefit?
The biggest benefit is energy. We are in an energy economy. People come to see any medical doctor because they've lost their energy or they have pain. Some way there's a disconnection to their energy source. This has to do in our body. It's called ATP. This ATP, which is a long word that I can't pronounce correctly, so I'm not going to say it. But ATP simply means currency for the body. So the listener, think of it like you have a bank account. When we're born, we have all this energy because we have all this ATP in our system. Our body's functioning really good. But then through life, it could be through thoughts, traumas, or toxins, which is the common way to explain how this works. If you had a trauma and you disconnect your body's ability to create energy, you're going to have pain. Just like the listener, if you took a rubber band and took it around your finger, when blood flow and circulation doesn't come here, this is going to be painful. But as soon as you take the rubber band off, blood flow, circulation, oxygen goes back in there, pain goes away. So if we can have blood flow, circulation, and oxygen, our body will function as it's intended. If we give it the right nutrients, detoxify the body, we're going to then rejuvenate the body, replenish the body, and this is all done through photosynthesis, just like a plant would do it. But in a person, we make nitric oxide and ATP. The nitric oxide creates vasodilation, which means blood flow, circulation. With the people doing statins, unfortunately, what's happening is they're losing vasodilation. They're losing the ability to bring nutrients to those areas of the body. And when it starts happening in the brain, they get dementia. When it happens in the feet, they get neuropathy. So there are different things like that. So we need blood flow, circulation, we need nutrients, we need activity. And if you use up all that ATP, your body builds energy not by eating food as much as through deep restful sleep. So if we're not getting the deep restful sleep that we need, what we call level 4 sleep, a couple things happen. You don't get the energy that you need. Your body doesn't set up the neurohormonal system the way it needs to be for the next day, and we don't detox the brain. So we need to reach that to detox, to replenish and rejuvenate the body and get it with more energy.
Yeah, very well said and beautifully laid out. I love our conversations. You talked about the timelessness almost. We talked about that a little bit. Whenever you and I talk for whatever reason and we do one of these, I feel like we cover so much with so much energy in such a short period of time that it's inspiring to me. And that's why I appreciate the relationship so much and what you're doing, the passion that you have. I mean, I'm 56 years old. People will say to me all the time, where do you get all your energy? You're, I think, a similar age, and I know you're a very energetic person. Talk to us a little bit about purpose, being purposeful in life and having purpose. What does purpose do for the brain? What does it do for somebody's quality of life? We've talked about it on other podcasts, and we talk about it a lot in the 100-Year Lifestyle. We have a poem, by the way. It's called The Purposeful Willing. It's a really important part of this conversation. And as it relates to longevity, I often think that people don't really necessarily find their purpose until they get decades of experience under their belt. They figure out what they're good at. They have some things that happen to them that are absolutely great along the way. They have some tragedies that happen along the way that frame them and shape them and give them another sense of meaning behind their work, their life, their importance. How does purpose, having purpose, clarifying your purpose, support brain health and also quality of life as people age from your perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'd like to point out. One is something in science called a strange attractor. It's kind of a quantum principle. If you have a purpose, that becomes your northern star. Let's say, like if you were a sailor, you're going to look to that, and all your activities, all your actions are going to be tuned to that. If you don't have that, you know, a ship that doesn't have a direction doesn't know where they're going, and therefore never reaches its destination. So purpose is so important. They've also done research with people, and you know, people say, why did they, you know, maybe you made a couple $1 million or whatever, and now you want to get back and you want to. They found out that these people that are doing it through research, they're literally getting $20,000 to $30,000 worth of brain chemicals dumped in their system when they're being of service to the community. So there's a healing benefit to that. Now, you don't do it for that, obviously, but that just becomes a side benefit. And the key thing is that we know, I'll just use an example that's a sad example, but maybe it'll drive the point home. You've been married for 50 years, you're 55, 60 years, and one spouse dies. How often do we see that within 2 to 3 months, the other spouse follows them? Because they don't have a future. You know, their future was so tied, their neuron, when we talk about grieving on a neurological level, grieving is the absence of neurological function that's been put in place. So let's say that you're that spouse that you've been with for all those years, you've projected into the future. They're going to be with you. You know, everyone's going to die like the Notebook. You know, you're in each other's arms and you both go together. You know, that's the way it's going to go. That's the deal I made with Cynthia. You know, so, you know, but you know, what's actually going to happen, we don't know, right? But when it happens, our brain has to repattern all of that neurology. All 100 billion neural bit processor in our brain has to reprogram. Now, to the degree that we want to go through that work, that effort, go through the grieving process, you know, whether it's 7 or 8 steps, whatever system you're using, you're going to go through those steps. If the brain can make it through that, then yeah, and you have a purpose, but a purpose drives above that. So, you know, when a husband and wife are together and they have a purpose and one leaves the mission, let's say, of what they're doing, but the other one agrees, I'm going to carry on this mission. They carry on that mission. And the worst thing you can do to somebody is take away hope. You know, and when you have a mission or whatever, and you're not self-focused, but you're externally focused on how you can help your community, what happens is you take care of yourself by taking care of others. It's a principle that's in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, that I think everyone needs to just embody, you know, and I think so many people have said that when you find what other people need and you provide it to them, you'll have everything you need. You know, yeah. And I think that those principles are not just written in books. It's been proven out in the science of longevity over the years.
Absolutely. And, you know, there may be some younger people here that are thinking, man, but I haven't found my purpose yet. So I'm not going to start doing anything until I find my purpose. listen, the best way to find your purpose is to start serving. People will find themselves in service. I love what you said. There are people throughout different stages of life. Maybe they've had grief, or they've had a situation where they lost somebody that was meaningful to them, a parent or a spouse or a significant other, or some even have lost, sadly, a child, and they lose themselves. And then all of a sudden they start to re-engage back into the world, and they start to serve humanity, and they begin to find themselves again. So I love what you're saying, because I've seen it be true for so many people, that you find yourself in service. And it's interesting how you talked about grief neurologically, because I have found over the years that grief is a very wacky, strange, unusual, misunderstood emotion. Some people will grieve in ways where they become reclusive, and some people want to be around people all the time, and some people get addicted to their work, and some people get lost in books, and people will just lose themselves within their grief. You just really explained it well, and that if they re-engage in service, they find themselves again, because of the way the brain will begin to reinvent itself and develop new patterns.
Mm-hmm. Well, even the person that's addicted to cigarettes, when we work with them, we have to work with them on grieving, because what happens every time they reach up to their pocket to get their cigarettes, or their purse to get their cigarettes, that neurological system's kicked in. It's on autopilot. They've done it thousands of times. So we have to retrain the nervous system. Once the nervous system is retrained, it won't do that anymore. But if your higher purpose, let's say that the doctor says, hey, you got to stop, or you're going to die in 3 weeks or something, if it's that imminent, people won't smoke anymore. That's their purpose now, is to be well and healthy. So I always tell people, your purpose is to be the best you first, and then be the best you to everyone else. If you're not demonstrating for yourself, if you can't walk and talk and be that person that you want other people to be, you're the one they're helping. You want to be one of the helpers. You don't want to be the one that's being helped. And for us, in my family, it was we were brought up Catholic. So the Knights of Columbus were real close to our family, because they would bring the gift baskets at Christmas. We had 9 kids in our family, and my dad, before he got help, was a very gifted alcoholic. So he had, we were the ones being helped. So I do things now for the food bank, because they gave us food, and anything that I do as far as to help out my clients, I always tie it into some nonprofit, that's gonna serve the people, or we're gonna go out there and serve them, because it's got to be tied in. And I just do that because it makes sense. That's what happens.
Yeah, you talked about the patterning, somebody looking for the cigarette, and that's a pattern within them. One of the things that we find from a chiropractic perspective, we see people that they come in our world. It's not our healthcare system is not really a healthcare system. It's a crisis care system. People come into 100-Year Lifestyle offices, chiropractic offices, and other types of providers that are a part of our world, people that use BrainTap. What I believe is such an important part of the decision point that people make about how to take care of themselves, that is 100-Year Lifestyle oriented, is going from a crisis care mentality to a lifestyle care mentality, and making that critical transition, as we call it, to go from crisis care through that critical transition to lifestyle care, is a repatterning. And we have seen people that have been on opioids, getting off opioids, been on all kinds of medications, be able to not need those medications anymore. People that have been smoking to calm their nervous system don't need to do that anymore, because we have helped them repattern their nervous system through the care that they've received, the chiropractic care that they received. Talk to us a little bit about, because I know that that's why a lot of chiropractors use BrainTap in their practices, as well as other providers. How does BrainTap, the technology, help people make that critical transition, like we call it in the world of the 100-Year Lifestyle, through this lifestyle care continuum, from crisis care through this critical transition to lifestyle care, to live their best life every day, their ideal 100-year lifestyle?
I think the best way to explain it is, if you were riding a bike or driving a car, and you're only to look at the tip of your nose, you're going to be stressed out all the time. Things are going to come at you. You got to react. So you're living more from reaction. But they teach you to look out along the horizon, right? To look out further ahead. And no one plans to get sick, really. I mean, that's not what they're doing. But they don't plan to be well. it's really a refocusing. And what I love about working with chiropractors is they have the chiropractic lifestyle, of course, and that's the wellness lifestyle, what you're talking about. You've got all the components there. And I think it's just a shift I remember my grandmother who lived to be 90 years old. So she's one of those exceptions. She was over 90 but she asked me one day that she hopes that when I get older, I'll be happy that I'm eating this kind of food, right? Because when I was in high school, they told me I would replace Huel Gibbons in the Grape Nuts commercials. That's how long I've been. And I said to my grandma, I looked at her, I said, Grandma, I'm not eating this way to feel good when I'm older. I'm eating this way to feel good now. And so if people start to realize it's not giving up something, it's getting something. When you start taking care of yourself, when you start being physically active, moving your body, eating correctly, challenging your brain, this becomes a lifestyle of choice, not of chance. When so many people, it used to be that, when you think about it, we go to our doctor and they're, of course, when they first were like doctors, they were helping the sick. Well, now everybody thinks they only see doctors when they're sick, but there's also wellness professionals, that are out there. There's books, and the information's there now, and it's proven. It's science. It's not. More people spent money on alternative medicine this past year than any other medicine. So, and that's because people want to take control of their health. And I think that the main focus is, how do you want to feel today? You want to feel good today? Then eat healthy. Because once you clean your body out, I know just last week I was watching my grandkids, and so I don't usually eat pizza and things like that very often. And if I do, but I ate 2 pieces of pizza and I felt terrible for 2 days. And I love pizza, but I like to make it myself with spelt crust, and not gluten. But man, I felt bad. And I told my wife, Cynthia, I said, I used to be able to eat just total junk all the time and never feel bad. But once you start eating healthy, when you've done something to your body.
Yeah, but you felt bad probably all the time. You just didn't know it. It's just your normal. It's like we say in the 100-Year Lifestyle, learn to love the things that are good for you. There's Halloween, they have this thing, trick or treat. And here's the reality. The treats are tricks. On Halloween, the treats, the things that we think are treats are really tricks. They have fooled us to thinking that those things that are really bad for us, that make us feel good in the moment, that they're really good, but they're really bad. And so learn to love the things that are good for you. Make those things your new lifestyle, and it will support you in the quality of life that you deserve, really, for an entire lifetime. So, hey, listen, we're going to start to wind down here, Patrick. Listen, we're going to put also on 100yearlifestyle.com. If you go to the100yearlifestyle.com/brain tap, let me tell you something. We're going to have some special things for you there. We want you to go there. We want you to enjoy it. We want you to utilize these resources. What are some of the things that people can get from Brain Tap directly that can make a difference for them? I know you have an app. You have a headset, which I should have worn. It's in the other room, actually, Patrick.
You can see it in the background there.
It's in the background there. I use it myself. I've used it for since I know you. And the reason we have become such good friends here is because I have tried it. I like it. I use it. I would never tell you to use anything or recommend anything that I didn't use for myself. And so talk to us about some of the things that people can utilize from Brain Tap to make a difference.
Well, I know one from the link that you have on the 100-Year Lifestyle. When they go there, they can get free access to the app for 15 days, try it for themselves. They can start de-stressing, find out how their body feels about that. But also there's a book that I linked to it that's totally free. It's a PDF. They can download. It's my full book, Thrive in Overdrive, so they can learn about the science, learn about the history. It's my latest book. We have another book that's in the works right now about Brain Tap specifically, but this one's about what stress is doing to our bodies. They get that totally free. And then if they like that, of course, we have wellness packages. We help people with improving their sleep or any patterns you would think as far as negative patterns wanting to change. We have sports programs. We're just finalizing a program now with Art Stills, who is played for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a Hall of Famer. We're doing a football program because we're doing a lot with concussions now and helping them. So we have some programs for that. We have different sports programs that people use. We have the hardware that, like you said, the headset, if people want to upgrade to that. If you're a medical doctor out there, a chiropractor, naturopathic doctor, whatever you want to use, we have programs that help you to introduce brain-based wellness into your practices. We have over 1,900 clinics now in the US and Canada, and we would love to have you as part of that. This past year, just since January, we've been in 37 different major publications. This is the time of the brain, and BrainTap is really catching on, and we're thankful that we're with 100-Year Lifestyle and helping to promote it. Unfortunately, people start doing these things for their brain maybe a little too late. It's better to start doing them early. I mean, my grandson and granddaughter, they're 9 and 6. They have the BrainTap. They use it after sporting events. We need to keep the brain healthy and whole because everything we do is either helping our brain to grow or stunting it. So we want to keep
absolutely. And listen, to reinforce what you said, we used this primitive technology 30 years ago that was exceptional for our kids. My kids used to get accused of, wow, did you have that test in advance? Because they would literally fly through tests because their brains were just developed. I remember they would exercise their brains and they got so far advanced in so many ways in the way they thought about things and how they were, just quick, really just quick and sharp. And so listen, if you're listening to this podcast, or if you know somebody that you feel like needs to have some support with their brain, let them listen to this over and over again. Go to the 100yearlifestyle.com/BrainTap. We're going to put these resources there. Check out Patrick's articles on there. And then don't just do it there. Go look them up yourself. Where can they find you directly, Patrick?
If they go to braintap.com or patrickporter.com, they're going to find out all about BrainTap, what I've been up to, how I'm doing things, and where we'll be. Like this next weekend, we'll be in San Diego. The end of the month, we're going to be in Beverly Hills. So different places doing things with different folks. We're a lot of the time in Florida and in Georgia, like you said, because we do a lot with Life University. So they can follow us on Facebook if they go to Facebook.com/BrainTap Tech or Patrick Porter, PhD. I have my own page on there too. They can follow what we do on social media, Twitter. We're everywhere that the kids here that work for us put us.
You're everywhere because brains are everywhere. And listen, if you want to live an active, healthy, long life to 100 years and beyond, 80, 90, 100 years and beyond, you're going to need to have a healthy brain. And don't wait until you lose it to get it back. Keep it sharp and healthy because, listen, if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, or 80, and you have your faculties to be able to listen to this, your best is yet to come. You have a lot of wisdom to utilize to make a difference in this world. We talked about purpose, so many valuable things on this call. So listen, Patrick, as always, amazing job. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, my friend, very much, and our friendship. And adjust your lifestyle, everybody. Well, until next time, Dr. Plasker with Patrick Porter from BrainTap signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the 100-Year Lifestyle Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have topics that you want us to cover, people you want us to interview, maybe you have some stories that you want to share, stories of yourself, loved ones, people in your life, we would love to hear from you and share your story. Please email us at my100@100yearlifestyle.com. And remember, nobody wants to get to 100 or even 50, 60, or 70 for that matter, crippled, broke, and alone. So please share the 100-Year Lifestyle, all of our podcasts, social media pages, website with your family, friends, and coworkers so they can take this journey with you. And until next time, adjust your lifestyle. Live your best life today and every day on the road to a sensational century.